Good. Welcome everybody to today's Trust Board meeting. We have apologies from Fiona Wheeler, from Alan Wishart, and from Ron White, the Chair of the Patient Partnership Council. Let us start straight away then with our patient story. You're very welcome, Pat, and Victoria will do the necessary introductions.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm joined today by Pat Palmer. Pat is, I'm sure she won't mind me saying, in her 80th year and looking really well. And she's going to talk about a situation she had last year in terms of some surgery that she had. Pat is also one of our volunteers. She's been with us for 8 years and does amazing things now on the maternity wards, but has also been in oncology and has also given talks to our heart patients. So she's really involved with the hospital. And our husband, Alan, is also one of our wayfinders, so they're really engaged with us.
Started last year noticing that a lump by the side of my nose had come up. About 9 or 10 years ago, I'd had it removed by the local GP, sort of in the corner of my eye. He said, if it's so deep, we can't get it all, it's bound to return. So nothing happened until COVID, and suddenly I noticed it's coming back. But by then it's encroaching on the glasses. It felt uncomfortable. Finally spoke to the GP. He gave me a referral for dermatology, and then they did a biopsy back in December 22. They said it's definitely going to be cancer, which straight away is alarm bells ringing in your head, and you think, oh, I'm not sure about this. They did an ultrasound, which was a bit strange. It was like pressing a deodorant roller across your eye. I was referred to Guy's Hospital because they do a slow-mos procedure where they leave the wound open. It's open for 2 days. They do the lab test. Once they've got the clear parameters, they might need to call you back again. I was destined to have 3 operations and then reconstructive surgery here at Queen's. So I had the first operation. In between, I was hanging on, waiting for that call back to Guys, and nothing was happening. Very nice lady up in Tick called Linda. I don't know what she was. Linda in the pink cardigan. She seemed to be the liaison between Guys and us. But she managed to get him sent to the appointment a couple of weeks before that, but she was really kind. Felt that she'd gone that extra mile and we had this kind of connection. So finally, I go up on the 1st of June to have the operation. It doesn't take any length of time at all, but I can hear them saying, there's tendrils going this way, there's tendrils going that way. The operation started out there and went round to the side of my eye and into the bone and down the side of my nose. It sounds a bit worse than I was expecting. It took them just 45 minutes. And it was lovely treatment. I was sent home with the transport that they supplied because I wasn't allowed to drive or go on public transport. And then I got a nice phone call sort of 2 days later. Parameters are clear, you don't need those other 2 operations, but you've still got to wait for 15 days because the surgery had already been sorted out from here. Anna Grantalia was going to do the surgery. She's a lovely Greek lady from here. I was told on the day of the surgery, we're not going to have it done. Just a day thing, you'll be in and out in no time. Each time I've had something done, somebody comes from cardiology to tweak my pacemaker up so that I get through the operation. After the operation, it's put back again, no problem. Somebody, the place is immaculate, but there's a lady from Sodexo cleaning everywhere. You could eat your dinner off the floor. It was brilliant. They looked after me so well. The operation starts at 11 o'clock. General anaesthetic, but they said, no, I've only got a 5% chance of surviving, so let's do sedation. That's fair enough. I'm happy with that. By 2 o'clock, I'm back on the recovery ward, waiting for the cardiac man to come back to put the pacemaker back down again. All going well. By 6 o'clock, I can go home. Everybody's looked after me. I've had wonderful treatment. I was told, take the dressing off over the weekend, come back on Monday, up to team 2. So we did this, it looked horrendous. Went back up to team 2 on Monday. Nobody knew anything about it. By now, it's open and it looks awful. and I'm confused, you know. Had they said, we're not expecting you, but I got the dressing on, I would have been all right. But it was frightening to know that the wound is now open and they don't want to see me for another week. So, my husband lost the plot a little bit, got a bit too concerned. I chased him out. The nice lady that had done the pre-op in the first place, we had that connection because during the pre-op assessment, we talked about family, and I said, tragically, we lost our son. And she said, oh, she lost her brother in the same way. So we got this connection. So when we came back, the appointment wasn't there. Remy came forward. She said, oh, I remember you. Go home, have a cup of tea. I'll see what I can do. A couple of hours later, I got a phone call. She's been able to contact Anna Contali, who's now at King George's. Come back again and we'll sort you out. And she very kindly sorted me out. She's been good all the way through, explaining everything to me. She even gave me her mobile number so that if I got a problem, I could contact her. And when it suddenly went wrong and it all swelled up, I contacted her, thinking, oh, she might come back to me in a couple of days. Within 10 minutes, she responded. In admiration of the hospital and everything that's happened, people have been so kind. Only thing I would say is departments don't seem to talk to each other. Particularly if it happens late in the evening and it's a weekend. I think that was the only confusion between the day surgery saying do this and this. There was no contact with team 2 because by then they've gone home being with them. Thank you for looking after me.
Well, Pat, thank you very much for coming today and talking to us about that. And obviously, thank you as well for all of the work that you and your husband are doing in
Exactly.
supporting.
Back to the hospital.
Well, it's very, very much appreciated. So it may well be that some of my colleagues have questions. If that's okay. They're surprisingly quiet. Catherine.
I think the reason this story is important is things. So we frequently see part of the journey is really, really good. And then if we want another bit, there isn't always that connection around the communication. So I think we talk a lot about communication, but this was a really good example of where we've done the right thing in a really good way. And by missing that appointment, it really does sully your memory of it, really, and causes distress to people. So we thought that was a good example of where it turned out right in the end, but actually we could have done it a lot better. And it is, as I say, a frequent thing which is thought of.
Is that something that an electronic patient record should assist with? Yeah. Okay. All right.
Just thinking, and thank you very much for sharing your story. You'd experienced sort of the very best of times and something that definitely wasn't. In terms of your recovery and how you were, how you were feeling in yourself, what was the difference between your experiences when it was going really well and when it wasn't? How were you actually feeling physically? Did you have any impact?
Stressed that things didn't look as I was expecting. I thought it was going to be just this small thing. I didn't expect it to be right across my face. It only took 45 minutes to get it out. Why did it take nearly 3 hours to put it straight again? Because there was obviously hundreds of stitches. And then when I left Guy's, I was told, walk slowly, don't raise your pulse rate. If you have to go upstairs, go slowly, don't bend stooping. And it seemed, well, that's a little bit over the top. When somebody came to pick me up to take me home, I stood up and dropped my glasses case. I quickly picked it up and it poured of blood. I didn't realise it was going to be that serious, so they quickly sorted me out again. When I got home, I was then afraid to lie down in case this whole thing had happened again. They said, if you can't stop the bleeding in 15 minutes, get away. So for the next week, I slept on the settee, sitting up, because I was too scared to lay down. I wasn't expecting that to happen. I don't know if it's not the Queen's problem, that was a guy's issue, but other than that, I had no problems at all. It was just, I had faith in what they've done for me, trust what I'm being told. Perhaps I'm gullible, but I do trust what I'm being told because I've had such good service from the hospital.
Hi Pat, I'm Matthew, Chief Executive. And I think what was interesting, and it builds on what Catherine said, is you talked about one of the members of staff stepping in to help fix things for you. I think what we often find is that the sometimes people are fortunate and they get a member of staff who almost acts as an advocate for the patient and fixes things. They make the connections between different services. And because they understand how the hospital works, they know who to ring to make things happen for you.
Yes.
And that helps when that happens. There's other people for whom that doesn't happen and they don't get as good outcomes actually. And I think, you know, we've heard other cases where that's been the problem. And I think there's something about us thinking in a more structured way about how we try to make the right thing happen more often. Not just because we get an exceptionally good member of staff who steps in at the last minute. Because lots of what we hear through our patient panels and through other stories is the clinical bit of the care was great, but the way you manage the appointments and the communications is where you let yourselves down. And we hear that over and over again as a theme.
I really feel that Linda behind the scenes, job title, behind the scenes, doing the organising between the slow-mo part and me, that was brilliant. And then Remy, the sister who stepped up.
Yeah.
I thought that was astonishing. Husband did come back and apologise for losing his temper.
Yeah.
Kathy. So, thank you. You told that story brilliantly as well, I think. Every bit of it, fantastic. And just really a build on what Matthew and Catherine said is one bit that seemed to go really well was when you were given a phone number. Somebody gave you a phone number so that you could make contact when stuff happened.
That was the surgeon himself.
Yeah. How did that feel? I mean, I'm thinking it might have been quite reassuring. Yeah.
When she came up on the afternoon, when she'd been to King George's and she saw me late in the afternoon, she said, if you have any other problems, here's my number.
Yeah.
So 10 days or a fortnight later, when it suddenly swelled and it looked really weird, I sent the photo and gave her a text thinking maybe she'll get back to me in a couple of days. But within 10 minutes, she was back on the phone.
Yeah. That seems as that was a really important moment, wasn't it? Having that immediate contact.
And
You
she
don't know
went
what's
into
going to
great
happen.
details of why puffing up and swelling. I didn't understand, but it was nice to know that, oh, this is normal, it can carry on for probably another year. Whereas I thought, well, you've had the operation, that's it, you're finished, but going to come back for the next 4 years. So, yes.
Mahbub and then Ruth.
Right, thank you very much for sharing your story with us and volunteering work that you and your husband do. Amazing. And then you do not look anywhere near 80. So, of course. Yeah, well, it's true. I guess for what I'm asking is, what would you like us to do in terms of listening to your story, but what difference can it make? Because I'm thinking that the problem that was there about miscommunication was resolved because someone recognised you from having a conversation with them, etc. and stuff. And you know, with all due respect, you know, you're familiar more than the average person is with the sort of hospital environment and stuff. So if this is a problem, we can look into this, see if it's more frequently occurring problem. By we, I mean one of my exec colleagues here will do that, and then get back to you to let you know if there's a problem that we see that other patients suffering from, we can try and fix that systemic issue there. Is that something that you'd want from coming to?
That would be a good idea. From my own circle of friends,
Yeah.
the issue seems to be they know they're due to have an appointment, they don't always get the letter. Some people chase up the appointment and be told it's definitely next Tuesday, a letter's on the way, it still hasn't arrived. So they turn up, hoping that the appointment really is going to happen, but that seems to be the majority of elderly people, because they're the people I know.
Yeah.
Saying they're not getting the letters. So this could be a Royal Mail thing rather than a admin thing.
Well, it was my birthday on the 16th of Feb, and I got thank you. Somebody in Greenwich posted a birthday card to me, and it arrived yesterday. So if there are some Royal Mail issues, then perhaps that's something that we need to be aware of when we're relying on just one piece of communication with our patients. So that's it. And if you just said that your friends also got this anxiety about it as well, so it's kind of the anxiety of them thinking, have I got my letter or not? When's my appointment and stuff like that. My dad's 86 and he gets his letters and he WhatsApp them and sends them to me, etc. and stuff like that all the time. So I sort of understand, I think we all understand that there's that issue that needs to be sort of resolved. And recently we've seen on national TV, haven't we, some people complaining about Royal Mail.
Yes.
Yeah. Stuff. So that's something we certainly you can take back as a message to your friends that you can board and we should. Yeah.
The other thing is when there's somebody gets an appointment on the telephone, it's not always clear which site they're supposed to go to.
Right.
And I know this from my husband being away for that. They turn up and, oh, look, I'm a bit early for the appointment. Sorry, you're at the wrong site.
Yeah.
I didn't realise that.
Thank you. Ruth?
So I think the service you're in is one. I'm a GP, so it's something I hear quite a bit about, particularly for wounds thing. And it's very hard for us as well, for you to track down where you should be and who you should be reporting to. I think the digital transformation the Trust is going through will help some of this, but we need to get down to the details of it. I think it will help. We've also got other specialities, so I think are particularly good at this. I think our cancer services are very good at giving a telephone number, a person to contact, and haematology are also particularly good at having that contact with their patients. So it's something we could model, I think, across the board. For me, one of the big problems we have in hospital until the transformation is lots of the bookings are on slightly different systems. I mean, never mind people not talking to each other, the computers don't talk to each other either. Never mind them across hospitals talking to each other. And I also agree with you, you do get it through as the telephone message is just often VHIUT, and that's also what's on the booking system. But it's something that we can change now. Actually, that's a really quick fix for us to do, which would make a difference to plenty of people, wouldn't it?
Okay, good. You've prompted a lot of thinking and ideas, which is what we hope will always happen when we have a patient story. So thank you very much indeed. Thanks for coming. Yeah. You're very welcome to. Yeah, no, good call. I was going to say you're very welcome to stay, but you don't have to. Okay, so do we have any updates to declarations of interest or anything that anybody needs to declare? Good, thank you. So that brings us to the minutes of the previous meeting that was held on the 18th of January. Is everybody happy that they are a correct record? Take that as a yes. Has anybody got any matters arising that aren't covered elsewhere on the agenda? We have the action tracker, which has one action, which is about reporting to a future board meeting on the review of care of patients who spend more than 12 hours in ED who subsequently died. And we're intending to bring that back to the board in public on the 2nd of May. Any other comments or actions? No? Okay. Just a short update from me then. First of all, you will have seen, in fact, around the room, and certainly around the hospital site when you've come in, the posters for the new very important campaign that the Trust is running around abuse and protecting our staff from violence and aggression, something I know that was raised by staff themselves, and I think that we might touch on as well when we think about the staff survey results. It's not right that our staff should have to tolerate that sort of abuse. And in response, we've launched this campaign called No Abuse, No Excuse, which gives both examples of where it's happened and makes very clear what our messages about how that we will and how we will address it when we see it or when our staff experience it. Alongside that, there's an investment in 60 new body cams, which will help to protect frontline staff, and also new ways in which we can more easily ban abusive patients from our hospitals. Of course, we understand that sometimes there are reasons why people might behave in a certain way, but too often there aren't, and it is completely right in defence of our staff that if people can't behave appropriately to them, that they shouldn't be allowed in the hospital, and we will pursue that. As well as more visible security officers, the intention there obviously is making sure that we keep people as safe as possible. And I think this is an important initiative, as I say, that has been prompted by listening to what our staff have said and how we can support them. You might remember that at the last board meeting, we had a patient story about sickle cell, and very good news. We're one of only 22 trusts nationally to receive an innovative new system at Queen's Hospital that replaces damaged blood cells and reduces the need for blood transfusions, as well as helping to manage pain. So that's a really good example of an innovation that responds to the particular challenges that our patient story identified for us last time. In terms of other new services, we're very pleased that we've got the opening of our new diagnostic centre at the Barking Community Hospital. That's on track for opening in the coming weeks and will make obviously a real difference in speeding up the time taken for people to get diagnostic tests, and also, of course, demonstrates our commitment to Barking and Dagenham, where, of course, there isn't one of our main hospital sites, but where obviously it's very important that people can get access, particularly to things like diagnosis. Good example of some really good working in partnership with Redbridge Council, where we've been doing some outreach work in local communities to provide free health checks, information and advice across the borough. We often say, don't we, that people's health needs don't start and stop at the door of the hospital. What happens more widely in the community is fundamental in influencing people who will come here and the care that we will need to provide. So we've been offering checks for weight, height, BMI, cholesterol, blood pressure and sugar levels, and with a GP and healthcare team present, also then able to offer advice as to how to manage health needs based on the results of the tests. And alongside that, the local smoking cessation team to help people with giving up smoking. All part, as I say, of the proactive action being taken alongside partners to prevent diseases from developing and keeping people well for longer. Finally, and sadly, although he's still got a few hours in our presence to go, it is Nick's last board meeting today. He's heading out into the world. And we very much hope that you will keep us updated with photographs of glamorous and warm places whilst you travel. But you've been in the trust for 5.5 years. Anybody who does the role of Chief Finance Officer isn't in it only for the giggles. And it's never been an easy job to do, but I suspect particularly over the last 5.5 years, with all of the additional challenges from the pandemic, from financial pressures, from everything else that you've had to deal with, it's been particularly challenging. You've done it with considerable good humour and support for the wider objectives of the board and of the trust. So thank you very much for that, Nick. You've been a great board colleague and a really important contributor to the trust and to our patients and to our community and to the system as well. So thank you very much indeed for that, and we will miss you. However, your deputy didn't listen to you. You weren't able to put off your deputy Nick,
Try
that's
not.
why we're really delighted that Mike, who is not a new attendee to the board, but will from now on be attending in a different capacity, has been appointed as the new Chief Financial Officer. Having worked for BHIUT since 2019, and he's just told me that also his father worked for BHIUT as well. So this is like a generation, a new generation of Gibbons supporting the trust. Welcome to the trust, Mike. And you have very big shoes to fill, but I have no doubt you've been extremely well drilled and trained throughout your time working with Nick. So that's really good news. Welcome to you. Yes, we will miss you, Nick, but not until the end of the private board, so don't relax too soon. Good. That now moves us on then to the Chief Exec's report.
Jackie, before you do that,
Yeah.
can I just ask a question? Thank you very much for the comments you've made. On the new campaign, which I have to say, I'm very much in favour of in the comments you've made. But I was just wondering whether we are giving our staff any training and support to recognise when people are actually being aggressive. It's interesting because in the governance visit that I just attended, an incident was described, but the member of staff who was talking about it was almost brushing it off as if, oh, well, it's because. And I think there's a balance to be struck with inappropriate behaviour, but there's also staff recognising when people have actually gone beyond that, and also having someone on the ward who's got the capacity and the authority to step in and sort of calm the situation down. So, I mean, there are two things. One is about staff recognising, but also it's about potentially training specific members of staff and giving them the authority to kind of step in and deal with the situation. So I'm just wondering what we're doing in that regard.
I think that's a really important point, Marta, and I think Matthew can pick that up and then go into his.
Thank you, Marta. Yeah, I mean, I think the campaign's great. It's been really well received by the staff. I think you've raised a really valid point, because I think in some areas of the organisation, people have built up a tolerance of really unacceptable behaviour. And some of the stories I think we hear are things that if they happened in any other public sphere, simply wouldn't be accepted. And yet the staff, because they see it day in and day out, have developed this tolerance. There are nuances to it, and I think when we talked about this at the start, we were clear not to avoid that sort of zero tolerance language, because we have people who work with people with dementia, who work with people with mental ill health, etc., and contexts in which actually it's about how do we manage people's inappropriate behaviour while they're not aware of what they're doing or while things are difficult. So there are grey areas and tough areas for us to work with people on. But we are rolling out a programme of de-escalation training. And Janine and Catherine and I and various others, we've been talking about looking at the IR1 reporting that the staff use to report incidents, to look at cases where we think there's been violence or abuse there, to see if the staff have made the link between that incident and the new violence and aggression policy as well. And we've deliberately landed the new policy as a kind of living work in progress as well, because we think as we roll it out more widely, we'll understand more about the dynamics in the ward. I think it's interesting, but I think some staff see it as part of their job to put up with this at times, actually, and I think that's really, it's a real shame that we've come to that. And I think, as I've said before, we've moved from a position where it's always been a problem in A&E. I think some of the incidents we've seen recently in antenatal services, it was a group of staff from Care of the Elderly who came to see me at one of my Brew with Matthew sessions to talk about aggression from families. It's become a really widespread problem, actually. So we are going to have to get people to understand where the baseline is, but also show that there's a proper organisational response. So there will be training. There's a lot more work for us to do to get this into the place where staff recognise what's happening and feel empowered to act on it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so a couple of things to draw your attention to. The first was just to say on apprenticeships. I think it's been a big focus of work that's come through this board a number of times, and we're now a registered training provider for apprenticeships, now Ofsted regulated in addition to everyone else, CQC, MHRA, etc. But we now have reached the stage where 5% of our workforce now are apprentices. The feedback we're getting from people who are on apprenticeships is fantastic. I think managers have started to really support people. as well to take up those apprenticeships, to recognise that the time we give people to do the training and learning is an investment that pays back to us actually as well. And then thank you today, Margaret Hodge MP, who hosted a reception at Westminster, a breakfast reception for a number of our apprentices actually. And there's some great video footage of that, a couple of interviews with some of our staff who seized the opportunity to train in that way. And I think for us as a local employer and as a really important part of the North East London and BHR footprint, we want to see those numbers grow. And I think, you know, we could see ourselves reaching 10% over the course of the next couple of years at a bit of a canter. So I'm really positive actually, and one that I think it's great for us to celebrate. Digital, I think a couple of things have come up today already in that patient story, where actually an electronic patient record will help us. I think Nick and I are now counting down the weeks. I think, is it 62 weeks now, we reckon, until the rollout of the electronic patient record here. And there's lots of moving parts in this. We're working really closely with BARTS and more broadly across North East London to roll out the implementation here. I think it's important that we don't underplay the significance of this as a piece of work. The huge amount of physical infrastructure rollout we need for better Wi-Fi in the organisation, the devices, the training, and then the core electronic patient record itself. You know, when we meet as a board in a year's time, we'll hopefully be ready to switch on in the course of the next month or two. That is not a long period of time for us to do a rollout of this scale. So it's just to land that a very common theme of every one of my updates for the next 12 months is going to be how are we getting on in terms of the EPR? How are we learning from other EPR rollouts recently where there's been some challenges around it? And we've had the first of a couple of exec workshops this week with Oracle Millennium, who are rolling out the product for us as well. So we can really get cited on that. And I think it's going to be probably the single biggest thing that we do over the course of the next 12 months as well. So just to say, I'm now very much in, 62 weeks isn't long for a piece of work of this scale. So it's very much, I'd say, top of my priorities for the 12 months ahead. A couple of other bits and pieces. Just there's some information in my update on some of the place-based work we're doing. Dr. Jagan John, who works very closely with us as an organisation, he and his colleagues in Barking and Dagenham recently ran a health and wellbeing day there. It's a no appointment necessary opportunity to come in and see a GP and see a range of other health and wellbeing initiatives. They had 7,500 people turn up. There was a number of our clinicians there. And we'll be there in bigger numbers next time actually as well, because there's clearly a huge amount of demand out there in our local communities for access to healthcare. And I think what really struck me listening to our patient story there, by giving Pat our mobile number, that surgeon avoided an A&E attendance for us. So that's probably saved us 350 quid for the sake of a text photo and a 5-minute conversation. Actually, there's lots going on in the community around here where we as a trust, by getting out there into the places around the hospital, can do a lot to support people with early access to healthcare. And I think the work that Jagan and his colleagues are doing in Barking and Dagenham is genuinely fantastic. Actually, and I think for us as a trust, it's a theme we need to build on this year. But I think it's probably something as a board, if any of you are interested in hearing more about it, it's well worth us looking at. Urgent emergency care, talking about A&E attendances, our numbers for January were up 9% on the year before, which is interesting. That's not a pattern that's been seen everywhere in London. We've seen a 9% increase. We also saw 700 more ambulances than in the January year before, which is around a 30% increase in ambulance numbers coming in as well. Queens in particular saw the largest increase in ambulance attendances in London. That said, of the 28,000 people who came in, we treated 6,000 more than within 4 hours. We are now pushing this month to try and deliver on the government's target of 76% for March. And I think we're on track to meet that, and we'll be able to report on that at the next board. Just wanted to give a shout out to PELC, who run the Urgent Treatment Centre, who are continuing to really push, moving them out of the atrium at Queen's and working on the pathway at King George to really improve patient experience, actually really improve the quality of service. And I think it's been good to go through a winter where, despite some real pressures, actually the front doors of the two hospitals have worked much more effectively in a more resilient manner than in the previous year. So thank you to everyone who's been involved in that. And as we head into the spring, we've got 2 new theatres opening at King George, and they're part of the North East London Targeted Investment Fund. So they'll be caring for our patients, but also for patients across North East London. And we're starting to see a lot more movement between the 3 trusts now as well. We're about to start sending some of our neurology patients across the parts. And the Homerton are also taking patients for both the other trusts. So there's a real sense the providers working together. I know there was a great visit to theatres at Newham yesterday with colleagues from surgery from across the 3 trusts getting together to look at how things are working. There's some really good work going on there. So we've got lots of new state opening this year, lots of new services, and lots of new care coming on stream as a result. And finally, just to echo a thanks to Nick, really enjoyed working with him. It's great to work with a chief financial officer with such a strong focus on patients, actually. And I think what came through in the interview process actually was that we can expect more of the same from Mike actually as well. And also just to say thank you to Louise as well. We've announced that she's got a new role at Guy's and St Thomas's. And I think we'll have them on board with us as well, but we have announced it publicly. So congratulations, Louise. And we look forward to seeing you move on to great things south of the river.
Thank you, Matthew. We hope you're going to come back and celebrate the EPR law. Good.
We'll do it then.
Great, thanks for that. Thank you. Are there any questions? Leslie?
It's just a comment rather than a question. I mean, it was an absolute delight to be at that event at the House of Parliament with our friends and some really amazing stories. And I'd like to just place on record my thanks to Kenye and Leslie and the team with the kind of Janine and Catherine's executive level drive behind it, because it wouldn't have, something like that is brilliant to be able to celebrate, but an enormous amount of hard work has gone into getting us to the position where we can be really proud members of the 5% club. And as Janine and I both said afterwards, why stop at 5? Let's go to 10.
Yeah.
But the amount of effort that Kenny and Leslie and the team put into that is nothing short of remarkable in such a short space of time.
Thank you, Leslie. Kathy?
Just again a quick comment really, and I was just reflecting. This is obviously the final board of the year and of the financial year, but you know, I don't think we should underestimate that list of things and the things within that report, particularly Matthew's report. That it does feel like a trust going somewhere and on a path for improvement, and it's very patient focused, all of these things. So I just want to say it feels different now, and I think that just feels really positive. I know there's lots of challenges and we'll come on to those, but I just thought it just shows what can be done when you put your mind to it. So thank you.
Thank you. Good. Let's talk provider collaboration. Shane?
Thanks, Jackie. Colleagues, you've got a report there. I'll just draw out a few points, and some of which has been touched on. So some of the collaborative work in the APC around diagnostics. Some good news. I mean, the capacity coming online soon. Jackie's mentioned the Barking Centre very soon. St George's May, and we've also got the Mile End Centre coming online in July. So that's a huge increase in capacity for residents of North East London, which is to be very much welcomed. And then Matthew's touched on additional theatres coming at King George's. There are also additional TIF funded theatres coming, Target Investment Fund theatres coming at Homerton. And again, the ethos is to treat this as system capacity, so patients right across North East London can access services in a way and time that suits them. So a real kind of clean spirit on capacity coming in. And of course, with yesterday's announcements from Chancellor, we would just want to refocus ourselves around, well, what else could we get to get some of the money into North East London, because it's well on the record about how underrepresented in terms of our capital allocation in particular. So there's some leverage there potentially in this digital investment we might want to think about as a general capital. We're also looking across the APC into how we can strengthen the areas of clinical collaboration and have probably a smaller set of bigger clinical work streams, if that makes sense, to focus on throughout the year. We'll also review leadership and resourcing of the acute provider collaborative, and then fundamentally where we can do more of the corporate inverted commas stuff together, but Bill has been the obvious example where the leverage of our scale of our trust together allows us to hit the market and get a better deal for our trust and for our patients. In terms of development of the collaborative, we're being supported by a development partner that's actually part of the North East London ICB. I think it's to be fair to say the ICB itself is part of our collaborative. They're part of all collaboratives. So very much looking to redesign and refocus the purpose of the collaborative going forward, what leadership principles and behaviours we expect to see within that, and then how we will, I guess, continue to adapt to the environment, which nationally is very much looking for collaboratives to work together beyond their organisational boundaries to get the best for patients in their patch. It's pretty much as simple as that. And probably the final thing to note in the report is that there is a review of provider collaboratives going on in London. Helen Brown, CEO of the Whittington Health, is on secondment to London to do this review. Matthew and I have had some sort of sight of the early findings. Essentially, at the moment, it's pretty much almost like a state animation on what is happening with provider collaboratives, what some of the best practice might be, and we'll look to incorporate that into our own thinking exactly as we go forward. Apart from that, the board's asked no report. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay, let's move on to the Quality and Safety section, Quality Assurance Committee report. Kathy?
Thank you very much. Obviously, you can see from the report that we've covered a lot of areas during the last meeting. I was just going to raise a few of those. First of all, maternity, which we've obviously got on the board agenda today, but I think worth noting that there's been a review of staffing, and I understand from a move that's also been discussed at the Finance Committee about the Birth Rate Plus and the need for more midwives, and we'll come on to that. But it's good that it's been discussed in both areas. And also, it was highlighted around the lack of theatre capacity, because people will have noted the increase, as you see through the papers, of the number of caesarean sections. Quite right, it's a safety issue, but it does lead to a theatre capacity, which is something, again, board will need to discuss. We had a deep dive into frailty in older people, and this is a relative new thing we brought in, is bringing in a sort of deep dive into something in a care group, and I think that was really valuable, actually. I think it's something we will continue to do, but it left us feeling there was a lot more work to do across the community because of some of the things others have already mentioned. And then the final one is we heard from pharmacy, and again, we will do a future deep dive because I think there's a lot more work to do in that area. But other than that, I'm happy to take any questions, but I'm sure Catherine and Manta will flesh out quality.
Thank you, Kathy. So let's move on then to some of the specifics that were identified there. And we're starting with maternity services reporting and a range of reports that Catherine will shepherd us through.
So Abby and Catherine are supposed to be coming to present it, but I think because we're a bit ahead of schedule, we're not quite here yet. Would we be able to do the other bits?
Yeah, okay, let's do that. So let's go to item 13 then and do the regulation 28 prevention of future deaths item.
That's me.
It's me,
yes.
Yeah,
Before we start, I'd just like to introduce Kerry, who's joined in as our new Director of Quality and Safety. And I'm doing this report on her behalf for this board. So we've had 5 PFDs in the last year, financial year, from April 22 to March 23. Overwhelmingly, with all 5, communication has been identified as an issue, and there are some specific themes related to the governance of serious incidents within the organisation and how there was lack of oversight, or which the coroner was particularly keen we address. And we've, if you look at the 3 or the 5 cases that we have, 2 of them relate to surgery, and I think rightly deserved in terms of the bookkeeping or the keeping of records within an electronic system. And I think EPR will go a long way in identifying or working with us. We've had 1 related to frailty again, that will hopefully, with new electronic recording, we will be able to pull together a system that will help us have oversight about fluids, antibiotics, and the delivery of clinical care. We've had 1 related to radiology, and I think that has been, there's been some significant learning from that particular case that is overarching across all of the divisional teams. And with the introduction of the radiology event and learning meeting, I think there's been good attendance and good engagement within the clinicians. And I think this is something we're trying to work with BART, with Andrew Ragg from BART, is around how do we, when we ask for investigations, how do we keep track of clinicians who've asked for the investigation, and they keep it cited, they are cited on the reports or the results when they come back to them. So in this current year, we've had 3 PFDs that have been issued. Significantly, the coroner has taken, has been really impressed with the progress we've made around the oversight around clinical incidents within the organisation, and is working quite closely with us. So I expect, as the relationship improves, that we will see a reducing trend in the prevention of future death notices, as well as an improvement in how we prepare for our inquest within the organisation. Happy to take questions.
No questions for Mansell?
So I think it's really good that we're having a look at this. I think that one of the things which again, I think we can oversee through quality assurance. If you go back over time, there'll be PFD and we have a point where we say, oh, yes, we've implemented that recommendation. My question for us will be, how do we know we're continuing to maintain and sustain the change that we believed was happening? So that's one of the things. I don't know if you have an immediate answer, but I would suggest it would be helpful if we could oversee that and kind of look back further and do a review of have we missed, because quite often when things come up, what would really quite rightly annoy a coroner is if they were to say, actually, you had one of those 2 years ago, but you still made the same mistakes. I think it's that embedding that I'm just asking about.
Catherine? I think it's a really good point, and we do something similar with CQC actually, because we have a whole range of actions. We say we've all done it. So about once or twice a year, we go back around sort of last 5 to 10 years to see what we've learned, to see whether it's still in place, and also look at other organisations CQC reports to see if there's anything else that we need to do. And we normally bring a paper through Quality Governance Steering Group, so take it to practice. That's when you think about that, to give some reassurance that we are still on target with it, because you're quite right. You can make a change, then everything goes back to normal. I don't think it.
Good. Okay, thank you. So let's go back now to item 12 and the maternity services reporting.
Thank you. We're all going to do one report. So we're going to start with our meeting maternity services.
Good afternoon, everybody. The first thing I'll be just giving a brief overview about is our CNST year 5. It's just to assure the board that we met up the 10 safety actions for our CNST for year 5. And we'll continue to monitor this through our internal and external governance processes, which I believe everybody has read the report as well. I'm just going to go briefly into our key findings for the perinatal deaths. We do realize that we have some work to still be done in terms of improving our position. This work is going to be monitored through our internal governance processes. And actually, we have a maternity deep dive that will be presenting in March at QUAC. The other thing I'll be touching on quickly is in terms of new maternity patient experience reports that has just been published nationally. The last time we had this report in 2022, our maternity unit was one of the last 7 bottom. But this time around, we've improved from that position. 36 out of 49 questions, we've improved significantly, and 5 stays the same, and 5 is new ongoing. So this, we're still going to continue monitoring. Then in terms of our CQC improvement, which Catherine will be touching on when she talks about the NSSP program. The theme for escalation for this meeting is just in terms of our triage environment, which is not currently fit for purpose, or there is ongoing work and there's mitigation in place. This has been raised a few times. Thank you.
Are there any questions on the update report first? Marta.
Thanks very much for the report. I'm particularly interested in the triage area because this is something that I raised probably over 12 months ago. And I have a suspicion from some comments I've heard recently that nothing's happened. So it's about the line of sight within the area, and it's about appropriate seating for women waiting in that area for extended periods of time. So I know that Abby has said that, work is in hand, but I'm not entirely sure how long it takes to get some new seating. I don't understand why it's taking us months.
You're right, it takes absolutely ages. It's a PFI building and it is ridiculous. However, we're looking at the whole of the triage area. line of sight and the waiting area is not very good, and the actual triage area is not very good. So in fact, we were talking about this just at lunchtime, and there is some work with the Estates and Facilities Department looking at rescoping and reorganising that whole area so that it's a much better area. So it does take a while, and it does take that to gauge it, but it does take a while.
I mean, I think we need to let the board know what the timescale is for the works there, because I think it's not an ideal. It was interesting being at the Barts board yesterday, actually hearing from Trust Director of the Royal London actually about some of the challenges they're facing, also around triage and around making sure the patients got time and space to be cared. And I think what we're seeing across North East London is the number of sicker women who require an emergency treatment coming in is putting real pressure on the triage and pre-labour. Trying to get people through to the labour ward, it means we need to get that drainage area right. And as we were discussing earlier, we've got a great team up there. The environment they're working in isn't fit for purpose at the minute, both in terms of sightlines and also the general decor, etc. It's not the right kind of environment. So we'll let the board know what the timescales for the works and then report back.
Okay, good. So perhaps we can put that as an action and we can have that review.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Any other questions for Abby on this paper? Okay, let's move on, Catherine.
Thank you. So this is the birth rate plus. I've talked about this a couple of times in the private board. We recently, as a result of that information, we have to significantly increase our midwives. We need to increase them by about 40 whole-time equivalents, which will obviously put a bill of about £2 million into the workforce budget. Obviously, we were talking to the ICB in a number of papers in this pack. We talk about conversations that were happening with the ICB to see about how we can fund that additional number of midwives. It won't all be midwives, some of it will be nursery nurses, some of it will be staff nurses, but the vast majority will be midwives. So it's really to bring the paper here to formally inform the board that we've undertaken the review. We've noted the increase in need for maternity midwives, and it's based on complexity. So Matthew's just talked about complexity and triage. We're seeing enormously complex patients, women, and we need to increase maternity ratios from 1 to 24 to 1 to 20.
Okay, thank you. And just to be clear, in governance terms, we're not as a board approving additional funding in this meeting. Okay? This is for information and, as Catherine has said, to consider the implications. Leslie.
And I think that was my point, because actually it says we're being asked to approve the.
Well, we're not,
Monday,
just to be completely clear.
And there's actually, if you cross-reference the paper somewhere in FIC, it says they've looked at it and talks about the money. But in general, in governance terms, it would be helpful, even then we're not being able to approve it, the financial implications, it's got a number in, but actually it would help if there was a bit of extra paragraph in there that said, and if we need to do this, we can, or looking for somewhere else for funding, because it's a little bit unclear. It's a large sum of money, but there's no clarity about what's happening in the financial implication.
So I think we can pay off the financial route slightly separately. I think the Barts are going to do birth rate plus next year, I think. So I think, as we'll see probably across the 3 trusts, it could be well north of 100 additional staff needed for maternity services in North East London, and the bill could be, multiples of what we've been asked for as well. So that needs a workforce strategy with it, as well as a funding strategy. I think if what we're seeing is a reflection of the population's health changing in a way it's putting additional pressure on services, my view is that's a discussion with the Integrated Care Board around appropriate funding for this. So I think the discussion has been had at FIC. I think it's still a subject to negotiation about where the money for this comes from. And I think it's important the board's aware, because I don't think it's an optional area of spend. It will take a long time to get these people in as well. And we'll have to look at the skills mix and what's realistic in terms of staffing mix, the double running costs that'll be associated with what's likely to be overseas recruitment for some elements of this as well. So there's a lot of moving parts in here. So I think next time we can give a real clear rundown of timescales and conversations around it. I think it is worth noting, I think we've moved in the space of 10 years from a ratio of 1 to 29 to below 1 to 21. And I think some of us will remember when it was around 1 to 40 actually. So I think this is a real sea change actually in expectations around the level of oversight of women who are giving birth at the minute. And I think it's part of what we'll hear from the broader discussions about health, the health of women prior to pregnancy and during pregnancy has got to become a real focus for us as a system, of course, this 12 months.
It's an enormous challenge. It's an enormous recruitment challenge. It's an enormous financial challenge, which the board needs to be aware of. But in terms of governance,
Yeah.
we have to do it properly and we have to do it system wide. And I
Yeah.
think that's so we'll need to make sure that we know how we're going to go about doing that in a way that enables the board to have a say. Sue, and then Leslie again.
Thank you. I think we've obviously only done this once and then again 3 years later, and it is clearly a fast moving situation with the complexity and the challenges that we're seeing. I just wonder whether going forward we should perhaps be undertaking this exercise slightly more frequently so that we're not confronted with quite significant step changes to this, and we are maybe more able to manage it in a more agile and fluid way. And I absolutely endorse the fact that we need to be having conversations in the system about prevention. I mean, Mike's been very articulate in other fora about diabetes and the consequences of that for childbirth, and therefore we do need to work collaboratively about getting upstream of this, because otherwise it's just going to cost us more and more money.
Catherine.
So the birth
Sorry,
rate.
Leslie. Catherine, and then go on, Catherine, and then Leslie.
Okay, birth rate plus is mandated nationally every 3 years, so that's why I do it every 3 years. So I take the point about doing it more frequently. And I don't know if nationally we want to be doing it more frequently, because I think everybody is seeing this huge challenge in it. But it is quite a long thing. We do it over about 2 or 3 months, and quite a lot of work to do. So I don't know whether we would be able to do it independently.
Leslie. Shane touched right at the beginning of the agenda about the APC and collaboration. Presumably, I know that APC is looking at priorities and looking at issues at the moment. This will be something that's very clear on the APC's agenda, both in terms of provision and prevention and funding, but also workforce, because it ought to be something the APC is all over.
Okay, thank you. Is there a third paper, Catherine?
Maternity sustainability
Yes.
plan, which Catherine did.
Thank you very much. So as you may be aware, as a trust, we entered into the National Maternity Safety Support Programme in autumn 2021, and that was after the previous CQC inspection. I'm pleased to say that we've been progressing well through the programme to a point where it's now been agreed with regionally and with the ICB that we're at a point of transitioning to sustainability and exit. During the diagnostic phase, 18 actions were identified. 8 of those are either complete or on track. The remaining are in progress. Work in the programme has very much focused on establishing stable maternity leadership, working on identified clinical pathways, safety culture, and I think that the private board is going to receive a paper on that later. Workforce, and you just heard about Rate Plus. From working on governance processes, and then a number of interdependencies, in particular thinking about the digital solutions and the maternity end-to-end EPR. The board really is asked to note the paper, and we're seeking endorsement to transition into the sustainability and exit phase with ongoing monitoring by the ICB.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments on that, Caroline?
Thank you very much. Looking at the induction of labour pathway, about completing that action, demonstrating sustainability, is that just the minimisation of visits, or is there anything else that that demonstration would actually entail?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of work around the induction of labour pathway in general. So some of that is looking at capacity, because we know that that's an issue. Some of it is looking around how we're able to fulfil the NICE criteria. And again, that's been recognised as a concern across the LMNS, so across the ICB. That's really a piece of work that we're doing both with the region and the ICB. In terms of exiting, that will be auditing of processes to make sure that we're able to run a safe induction of labour. service.
There's a few strands.
Yeah, there's a few strands there with it.
Just to say, we had an extraordinary meeting, a brief meeting of Quality Assurance Committee last week to discuss this in some detail. I think there's 2 points to me. One, at the end of the day, to be really for the MSSP programme to determine whether we've arrived at that place. This is about providing the evidence, and they've been working alongside, so they kind of know the progress. So it will be kind of for them to determine that. But also, I think we focused a lot on, it's not just about saying you've done things, it's actually what's the impact been of those things. So I think there was a real focus on that. But given some of the things that we know about, we've had the 10, I call it CNST still, but you know what I mean, the MIS things have all been positive and so on. It does feel overall that we're probably around the right space to do that, but it's kind of at the end of the day, probably not the trust decision as such, is it?
Good, thank you very much. Thank you, Abby and Catherine. Okay, integrated quality and safety report then, I think it's few reasons.
So this is, I'm just going to talk through the brief highlights of the paper. We've transitioned into PSERP at the beginning of October. We will do a 6-month review of PSERP at the end of March. But during that period, we seem to have seamlessly transitioned into the new ways of working, but it has come with considerable challenges. Partly it is about the availability of staff for us to be able to do the after action reviews in a timely fashion. And the second has been in terms of having enough trained people, and the people who are trained been given enough time to do the investigations as required. Currently, we've got about 27 serious incidents, and we've got 2 of them being done externally related to patient care across specialties, and 9 of them are related to HSIP. We've also completed or done our submission for the first COVID-19 inquiry, which has been a fantastic piece of work led by the legal team. And Magda, I have to thank Magda, our previous Chief Medical Officer, for the support she's given me in the submission of that document. In terms of our audit, we're getting into a much better position in terms of our clinical audit, having better visibility and engagement from the clinical teams, and working through the current transition between the Health Assure to Ulysses is being done through a staged program. And we've started with the nursing bits at the moment, but we will have a clear timeline that will deliver against that. In terms of our complaints response, we have been meeting our targets, or we are just below 95% for the number of complaint responses that we've been giving. We've done a huge amount of work in terms of the communication and the language we're using within the complaint responses, which I would like to also say the duty of candor that we're doing is also been reflected in how we're working with that. We've had some fantastic work being done by Kenny and the specialist medicine team in stroke, where they are looking at activities that we can provide for stroke patients but in hospital, and often with a long length of stay. The number of risks that we have has increased, and I think I really appreciate Kerry's fresh pair of eyes into looking at how we do risk, and Kerry, Linda and I are working through our risk register and in the month of March, we're hoping to have a complete clear out or a reanalysis of how we've graded risk, what our actions will be, so that we start the new financial year on a fresh note. I'm happy to take any questions. That's it for me.
Can you talk to us about what we're seeing with respect to incident reporting? Yesterday at FARTS, we were talking about the reduction in the number of incidents being reported, and the suggestion was that this was a national impact of the shift. Are we seeing that as well, and what will we do in order to try to maintain the importance of incident reporting, even as we go on to the...
I haven't seen a trend in the reduction in incident reporting. So it's not been highlighted to me, but the number of incidents that we are investigating have definitely reduced with the new PSERV methodology. And this is again in the IOLG, or the weekly meeting we have is about understanding whether this incident has followed a similar incident within another division, and can we theme it and do the investigation once according to the theme rather than individually. Previously, we would have individually investigated each of the incidents. So I think, is that?
I would agree with that.
Yeah, yeah.
So to be clear, is that us kind of batching things with similar?
So PSERV says, PSERV suggests that we do it as themes rather than individual incidents as we've done before, as we used to previously do it. And increasingly, when we decide an investigation needs deeper analysis, we look at whether this theme or this case or something similar has come up. And do we batch it or do we do it individually as a new investigation? You are looking at the numbers.
Thank you, that's helpful. And just on a presentational rather than any other issue, the tissue viability slide is really difficult to read. And it's obviously an important issue, so if you can find a way of presenting it in a way that, despite taking my glasses off and holding it up close to my face, making myself look a bit bonkers. Listen.
I think I was going to ask the same question as you, and I'm not quite sure I understand. I think it's the chart on page 78. Is that chart showing the incidence per 1,000 bed days? Because if it is showing a reduction in it. It's marked as a special cause for concern. And what we saw at Berks yesterday was the same thing happening. So I think I've got the same question when I looked at that chart, and I'm sort of confused because the commentary at Berks seemed to be that this was a general thing that was happening everywhere, and actually Berks, the reduction was not as bad as everybody else. It seems to be showing a downward trend. So I'm slightly confused. The other question I've got was that it says right up at the beginning about duty of candour, about compliance, although this is improving. I couldn't find the data on duty of candour anywhere in the report, and I just don't know if I'm missing it or not, but I couldn't find any data on duty of candour.
We do have the data, and you're right, it's not in this pack. So we've done a huge amount of work basically around the duty of candour, particularly in terms of the communication that we do and putting in some structure of some SOPs around what is expected, as well as looking at the templates and how we communicate. And we do see the data on a weekly basis. It's not in this pack, it comes to IOLG. So we will include it for next time.
I think it was only because it said it was a challenge. Yeah, and therefore it would be, if something's a challenge, it would be useful. Right. But I'm really pleased that you've done the work that you have on complaint around the tone of how we write, because very often what people want is for you to be sympathetic or us to be sympathetic and empathetic. And the way we write stops lots of further correspondence. I think.
Just on this issue of the instance, and Leslie spoke to me earlier about it, I think the slide you're referring to is 83 in the pack is labelled 78. And that does show a downward trend. The difference, I think, between this and the information we're looking at Berks is that this is a trend that's been going on for a much longer time than PISA, which we've previously commented on, that actually that to make sure, because traditionally this has been a high reporting organisation, which is seen as good, you know, positive and openness. And I think we have observed and definitely commented on here previously that this has been a trend going down, but it is not, as far as I can see, it isn't specific to the PSERV introduction. So no. I think it's a different question around that one. But there is a downward line. Without a doubt.
There is a question.
Yeah.
Just not quite sure what it is. Yeah, Matthew.
So this is one of those graphs that it's showing you the incidence per, as you said, Leslie, per 1,000 bed days. Actually, if you look at the trend number of incident reports, there's not much variability in there, but the per bed day number is still above what we should be reporting at. We're still high reports per bed days. I think we could possibly show somewhere the actual number of incidents, which I think would give you a different baseline, probably a more stable baseline than you're seeing here because it uses a different comparator set. So I agree that with the long-term trend also makes it less of an immediate issue, but I suspect seeing 12 months of the actual numbers rather than based against the total bound days would help.
And I should say special cause for concern.
Yeah, leading back 12 months, which is
Yeah.
an interesting concept.
Yeah.
That's just the SPC.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on this integrated report? Thank you. Let's go to people and culture then. Lucy, the people and culture committee.
Yeah. I've got a chance to get through. So we talked about violence and aggression, which both yourself and Matthew have talked about. I think one of the things, and we've been overseeing the development policy, and I think one of the really positive aspects about this policy is how we've done it, because we've done it with staff. And I think that's really important to engage with staff. So the response and what we're doing is a response to what staff have told us, and the way we're developing it is what staff want. So we're going to be continuing to have oversight on that. And I think what's also good is the publicity that it's had both locally and nationally, I think shows us leading the way in this, which is really good. We looked at the Q3 medical education update, and I know we're talking about that in private order. There's been some pleasing progress on that, I think, which is good. We did our deep dive into specialist medicine clinical group, and that was really positive. I thought they were really good. And similarly, we had a discussion on perinatal cultures and behaviours, and it was the team that came to see us, Mamta, were amazing. And I did say that when we do board visits next week, I'd really like to go and see them and see what they're putting into action, because I think the way they were working with the team was really involving and engaging and working together, and they came across with such enthusiasm. And I think one of the things, similarly with specialist medicine, I think one of the things that is always uplifting is when people who know exactly what good looks like come and talk to you, and they can tell you how far they are from good, and can tell you about getting to good, and how they're working with the staff to do that. And I think that really clearly came across in both presentations that we had. And the other two items, or the other item on the EDI update, the equality delivery standard, to speak up with you two all next time.
Thank you. Yes, now we do have that item of two halves. Do you want to take us through it, Janine?
Yes.
This is on what we should be thinking about.
Yeah, I think it should be fairly brief, but serving it's two halves, public facing coins. So the first is the National Freedom to Speak Up review tool, which I mentioned at the last private board that this would be coming. The purpose of the review tool is to ensure that we as a board are cited on the role of speaking up and offering Speak Up Guardian service, and that we have the necessary oversight, but we're also sufficiently visible in our support for staff who wish to speak up. And so what we've outlined in the paper, I'll take the paper as read, but essentially what the paper is calling for us all to do is to be cognizant of the importance of the Freedom to Speak Up service, and to be involved in continuing to support our staff to speak up. So the key actions that we have taken, having carried out the review tool, I think having carried out our own the desk-based review, I think we're in a place where we have good assurance, because we've delivered on adopting the model policy. We have an independent Freedom to Speak Up service, which comes frequently to board and people in culture committee. We have exec and non-exec director oversight of Freedom to Speak Up. So we're ticking and we're meeting most of the expectations. The key risk that we have is that our contract with Freedom to Speak Up is due to come to an end at the in the coming months.
but we are going through the procurement process to continue to provide that independent service. I won't prejudice it by saying it'll be the same provider, but we'll be continuing to provide an independent service. That's that one. Should we go straight on to the EDS?
Let's just stop at that point. Good, and of course the board will remember that Paul comes and updates us. Just in terms of the evidence, he also meets regularly with me as well, and as well as Sue as the leading. Are there any other questions on the freedom to speak up? I have to say, also without any prejudice, I think it's a service, and I think he does a very good job. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Thanks.
Okay, and so the next one, this is coming to public board because part of the requirement is that we actually publish our EDS 2022 results, and so this is just bringing so that the board is cited on the report which has previously been through board for comment and feedback.
Any comments on that?
Yes, I just had a question. Under 2.2, it says when at work staff free from abuse, harassment, bullying, physical violence, and any other something. It says that we're achieving, and I just wondered if we should be developing, because we've got the policies and things in place, but it's relatively recent. I was just a bit surprised that it came out.
So if you think back, so before, I think it was around Christmas time, I think I was at home in COVID, we held an independent a panel which was made up, and so that was the scoring that came from there. And so appreciate that we made challenge, but I think that was the scoring that was based on that event.
Okay, I was just surprised by that. It's the independence of
Right, finance and operational performance. Item 17 is the report from the committee.
Thank you, Chair. We had a meeting on the 1st of February and on the 29th of February. The 1st of February, just a few items to raise. One is reorganisation of the Chief Financial Officer's portfolio. Significant saving to be made of about 1.85 million, but also changing the service to align in a way providing much more effective and improved advice directly to decision makers, directly aligning with the senior leaders of the organisation. We received an update on the campus network and the Wi-Fi. I can say the Wi-Fi in this room, if it's working better today, I'll take credit for that. If it's not, mine seems to be working better. That's an item on the agenda for later on as well. We did a deep dive into financial recovery, for which we gave a partial assurance, but there's no significant issues related there, minor issues to work on. On workforce control improvement report, that we were not using agency staff, but obviously there's a big push nationally for reductions in bank staff, and we reduced our overall workforce by 76 WTEs as reported on the 1st of Feb. But you know, there's pressures on staffing through winter. Moving on to 29th of February, we had a deep dive into estates as part of our board assurance work, and I want to mention that we think they've done some brilliant work delivering some real complex projects and still keeping the hospital running at the same time. So they're not working on, you know, brownfield or greenfield sites. As Louise showed me when I visited King George, there's still work underway, corridors blocked off, you know, patients and staff moving around and keeping the show running, so that's not to be underestimated. We had a digital update which is on the agenda for later on today, so I won't mention much about that, but there are some red risks that we want to mitigate. And I'm not sure if the team are coming, but we've seen that, this was a team that was assembled about 12 months ago. This is the team are really effective. They really gel together. They understand each of their own kind of specialisms and how collectively they add value. And that's really important on delivering such a high profile project for ourselves. On integrated planning, we had the numerical update and the top-down financial plan, so which Mike and Nick are going to cover anyway in private board, so mentioned that further. But on the IPR, good performance at HELC and good performance overall trajectory on our UECs. But we're still having patients staying far too long with mental health conditions or suspected mental health conditions in our emergency department. Still 47 patients in January stayed longer than 36 hours, waited longer than 36 hours for a bed. And the overall number of patients with under section 136 is still at 323. So while we've got to focus on trying to resolve that within at the system level. And it's one of those things, I guess, we just need to constantly be pushing the system and other partners to be on top of that. The cancer workshop that was planned for January didn't happen. That was to try and look at the pathway and try and unblock some of the problems there, particularly around diagnostics happening in a timely fashion. And it didn't happen because there was a strike on, so that was delayed. But the committee has got its attention and focus on that particular national target. And you might want to ask further questions when we get into the 4 minutes. And I think that's the summary of my.
Helpful, thank you, Mahbub. So let's go on to the integrated performance report then. Louise.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'll start with urgent emergency care performance. So as has been indicated, our all types performance for January was 74.1% against a national target of 76%. As Matthew said, this was despite an increase in attendances for the same month in 2023, but we are planning to meet the 76% by the end of March. Our type 1 performance, which is what is in our control by BHIT, was 50.7%. We have got some new transformation schemes in progress to try and improve that. So in April, KGH will open an expanded STEC, and a PEAS clinical decision unit has just been opened in February at KGH, and Queen's has just reconfigured some of their department to support better departmental flow. So that should help improve our type 1. Our plan trajectory, so to reach 76%, the type 1 is above trajectory, but as I said, we're just below the trajectory for all types. But we should say, as has been indicated before, that HELC's performance has improved quite dramatically, and they're now at 94.8%. And so I think we should acknowledge that improvement. If I move on to ambulance handovers, our handovers less than 60 minutes and indeed 45 minutes have been maintained. And it should be noted that we've received several inquiries about visits to share our great performance and our processes. And indeed, we have Portsmouth coming to visit us on Monday at KGH.
Portsmouth. They've got some challenges.
I've also had an inquiry from Southeast to come and visit us as well. So we seem to be quite popular. We are continuing to focus on initiatives that can reduce our ED occupancy and support flow. So increasing the use of STEC, our virtual ward, we've just increased the capacity for that, and a relentless focus on discharge. Queen's have undertaken 2 perfect weeks. We have the second one for KGH next week, and that will particularly focus on discharge as some learnings from Queen's for this time. Coming back to mental health, as Mahbub said, we have seen some positive impact from the Right Care, Right Person scheme which has been launched in conjunction with the Metropolitan Police on our Section 136 attendances. But as we've said, we have got to continue to work with now, reduce our length of stay in the department, which is in January was at 20.2 hours of average length of stay. And we are working with our partners to try and reduce that. In terms of the PTL and 52-week plus weights, generally a positive story, despite industrial action, which impacts elective activity the most. Within this, we have treated some patients within the wider North East London system, as was discussed earlier, and that has been quite positive. I move on to diagnostic DMO1. So the DMO performance in January was at 8.63%, but we have put mitigations in place to ensure this will be corrected, and indeed this has already improved. For MRI, that involved additional slots, and for neurophysiology, an improvement trajectory to become compliant at the end of this month. Also looking at if the demand is clinically appropriate. And then finally, I'm going to come on to cancer. This does continue to be our highest risk with our 62-day performance at 50%, and we are working to address that. Cancer panel meetings happened in February, and some other improvement initiatives include improvement groups, working with the Cancer Alliance across North East London, blitz diagnostics and theatre sessions. We have some innovation equipment. And as has been mentioned, the CDC at Barking will come online, and the 2 new theatres at King George will come online in April, which should support the increase in capacity. And that was concluded the update report.
Thank you, Louise. Leslie. I think this comes of having BARTS and VHRUT on successive days, but when we were looking at the performance report yesterday at BARTS, we were told that a combination of increased beds and the escalation, the 72-hour plus escalation to NHSE for patients with mental health challenges had actually led to a reduction in, I think, 17 hours, the average length of stay in BARTS. Now ours is still above, but have those 2 initiatives seen us have a reduction in the same way that BARTS have? Do we think that will continue?
Definitely the 72-hour escalation up to NHSE definitely helped. I can mainly speak for King George. We definitely are seeing less mental health for longer, but I think that needs to watch to see if it's sustained.
Shane?
Yeah, I think all I'd add to that update is just to sort of commend Matthew and the entire team for the improvements in performance, but more importantly, the experience of patients and the departments. It's really commendable. If you get what you wish for, though, of course, because as you improve, people start visiting from all around the country, and we've all been to places that were beacons that sometime later they don't sustain things. You already mentioned sustainability, so sustaining this is really important. Making sure our partners in PELC and at the other end of the system in terms of place-based discharge continue to up their game. So that'll be something that we're trying to reflect a bit more across our BARTS, actually, because BHRT is doing very well now in this area. There's some stuff to learn from.
Great. Good. Kathy?
Yeah, thank you. So I too would echo what Shane just said. So good to see the great progress. And as we sort of come up to the year end, there are 1 or 2 things. So it's great for patients when we make the progress, but actually hitting some of those things. So the couple of areas I wanted to just ask about, because they look as though they are within grasp, is the 76% for the urgent emotion, 74%. That feels, compared with many places, as though we're on the cliff, we're crawling up, and we're just nearly there. And then the faster diagnostic standard, again, it feels as though we're not there, but it talks about validation in the papers. But is there more we can do to get ourselves there? That'd be great to get those 2. And then just on the slightly concerning bit, and it's great folk are coming to visit, but I noticed for KGH, the ambulance handler, it's only 3 dots going in the wrong direction. But I just wondered if that's going to, what's your feeling about, is it going to turn into a worsening trend, and do we understand that? Can we, what are you doing to bring it back?
Yeah. So I think 76% is absolutely in our grasp. So far this month, we're hitting it, but we're only very early in the month. So I think we are very focused on it, and the teams are determined to deliver it. Now, obviously, there's a whole load of variables that go with that, but I think we are desperately trying to achieve it, and again, not just for 1 month, for that to be sustained. FDS. Yeah, we have met it for the last 2 months, and then this month we were off it, and it does talk about validation in the paper. I think Fiona is fairly confident that we will continue to meet it, and everything's being done to sustain that performance. You're quite right, Kathy, and I've absolutely got my eye on it. Over 15 minutes has started to increase. The 45 minutes and 60 minutes has roughly maintained the same, but over 15 minutes has increased to KD8. And actually, this month, I'm keeping an eye because our over 45 minutes has started to go up a bit. So we need to ensure that we are sustaining our performance and not becoming complacent. And absolutely assure you that we will do that.
Sue. Thank you. 2 questions. One, as I understand it, the mental health 111 service comes online 2nd of April. I'd be interested to understand what we think might be the result of that, for the pressures in our services, and whether we're planning anything as a result of that. And then secondly, it's great to see the CDC and other physical capacity come online, assuming that we have the human capacity to resource that and report on that. What do we anticipate to be the outcomes of that additional capacity? Where will we see that come to fruition for our patients? Thank you.
So NHS 111, yes, I've absolutely really positive. We've been communicating that to our teams. Clearly, if they get to our teams, it's too late, but actually the next time there's an opportunity there. So yes, we are ready to go and hoping that that will have a positive impact. And you're right, we should definitely be tracking that and see what impact that does have. But a positive initiative, I think, for the country, but for North East London. So yes. In terms of capacity, I'm probably less able to answer this one, but we will have a positive impact definitely at KGH on the theatre capacity, so that will enable us to get through all of our elective backlog. And then obviously linked to that in terms of the pathway, in terms of the cancer pathway, we'll have increased diagnostic capacity, which will mean that everything, such as the FDS, everything will become quicker. So we will need to track that, but it should be a really positive to enable our patient pathways to be sped up.
Thank you.
The 111 mental health thing is really interesting. I was the SRO for this in my last job, and I handed it over to Vanessa Ford, who regularly thanks me for handing over to Eleanor. It'd be done by you. It's actually a really complicated piece of work. The NHS, the mental health trusts have all got different crisis offers and all had different routes of accessing them. And what this is trying to do is to harmonise some of that. I think that the issue, we run the risk of A&E remaining the only place to send people if the crisis offers provided by the mental health trust aren't strong enough. So I think what we'll see is a differential success of 111 for mental health, depending on the extent, the seniority, the 24/7 access to the crisis services. The aim of it is people ring 111 and they can be directed to the NELF crisis service or to a crisis cafe or to come up to some other kind of thing. But its success is dependent on the quality of the alternatives, and the risk is some of what we see with the physical health 111, that actually an A&E attendance becomes a risk-based default as an alternative to a community assessment. So I don't think we'll see an even spread of responses to that. And I think we'll have to watch very carefully to see what behaviours result from access to that.
I'm in discussion with Redbridge actually, because Redbridge don't have a crisis cafe. So what does that mean? Because like Matt said, there's nowhere to divert them to. So we are looking at whether or not that's something in Redbridge that could be established.
Caroline.
Just want to pick up about the weights where it's mentioned here about workforce capacity and you're actively securing additional capacity. Could you say a bit more about how you're addressing that? Because staff shortages are something for you.
Sorry, Karen, under which section?
Under the cancer operational performance.
Oh, so yeah, in terms of additional clinics, etc. So they're securing additional clinics. I think think in one area we had clinics that then stopped and they're putting those back in. Obviously, workforce is a challenge generally. And Janine may maybe say more on that, but I think generally what we're probably finding is that as we become a better reputation as an organisation, we're able to attract more individuals to work here. And we've probably seen that more recently. We've had some really good calibre people coming in, other than anything else. But I mean, yeah, generally, we are finding that we can attract more good people, which then enables us to also fill our vacancy rate, which links into the finance initiative.
Yeah, no, because it's interesting as parts of the long-term work and, and seeing that improvement. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think in terms of that, so as Louise's point, as you said as well, Caroline, there is something about a virtuous cycle that we are now embarking on. And I think for our frontline staff, one of the key things that, is thinking about that link between, we'll hear about more this in the finance report, that link between substantive bank and agency. I feel like we're now moving in the right direction. So our staff are now more willing to take bank shifts because they know that they will not be put in situations where they're worried about fill rates in the way that they might have been through the work the excellent work that the workforce hubs have been doing, which then means that we're not then having to use so many agency staff. So then more staff want to come on with. So it's that virtuous cycle that we're on. I think at the heart of this also comes the shift in our leadership as well, and our leadership capability. And as the manager's license becomes further embedded, I think we can continue to see that trend increase.
Okay, thank you very much. Finance report, Mike?
Thanks, Vicky. Okay, so as for the task for Q4, so we can hit our £14 million deficit, was that we delivered a 2 million surplus, operational surplus, and then we undertake a planned non-recurrent transaction of 5 million. In January, we've missed the plan by £1.5 million. So we now need, in the final 2 months of the quarter and the year, to deliver an operating surplus of about 4 million to add to the 5, and that will bridge the gap to the 14 that we know to hit. The key challenge that we've had is the number of whole-time equivalents that we are running with. So really successful recruitment and permanent staff. We're up towards the 8,000 number now, but we continue to run with 1,000 to 1,200-ish temporary staff, and that has been very consistent for 12 to 24 months. So that's the challenge. Really good conversation at the executive about how we would like to go about reducing those numbers, and patient-focused way is fix the flow. We don't need staff to care for patients who are effectively waiting in our hospital. So that's how we want to do it. We also need to continue with getting patients through and off the waiting list through strong elective performance. And then we need to look in kind of other areas for temporary staff and see, if they're, the value that they add versus the cost. So there are ways that we want to look at controlling costs in the final month of the year now. In terms of our NOF4 ambitions, we have to deliver £20 million worth of sustainable savings. We're at 19.5 after 10 months, so very much on track to do that. And our 5 main control metrics, again, are still showing that in the right direction, so we are meeting all of those. And our quarter-on-quarter performance has been better this year, so we are meeting those kind of criteria. We just need to make sure that we do that again in quarter 4. Just on capital, it's similar to most years this time of year. Trying to land that is a bit tricky, but I think we're confident we'll be there or thereabouts on the capital programme by the end of the year. And the cash, so we did a while ago to say that we needed a cash support package. That has not been approved because we aren't forecasting going below £1 million worth of cash, which is an incredibly low number when you spend 2.5 million a day. It's a very, very low nationally set number.
So they'll make that decision in an afternoon, will they, if necessary?
We're forecasting not to drop to a level where we're going to need it, and we're working with the system to advance as soon as we get into ACE. So it's this artificial year end that puts barriers up, but we're working well with now, and that'll help us out when it comes to April. So we'll get through, but it's not comfortable. But the headline's very happy to take that.
I was going to ask about cash, surprisingly enough, and you have answered it. Thank you. Kathy?
Not about cash, but, oh dear. Good luck. I was just going to come back to, I'm trying to think of a different way of asking a question I've been focused on. I'm sure we all are. So good that we've managed to recruit people substantively. I mean, that's a positive move, isn't it? But not being able to reduce our temporary, I just wonder what correlation do you see between areas where we have increased the substantives and reduction in temporary? Because that's the test for me. Otherwise the theory is wrong, isn't it? You increase your substantive and it doesn't reduce your temporary, which in case you just bitten twice, actually. So I don't know if you have that analysis.
So a real area of success is critical care. So if we go back to April, May, that was one of our areas of our framework usage. Through a phased approach, we've now got the numbers that we need in there, and we're down to roughly almost zero agency in that area. That's been a combination of recruitment. Bank has now gone up, work on the rates. That's a real success story. And
But bank as well, I'm counting temporary as bank as well.
Absolutely.
Because again, nationally, I think the expectation is we'll not just reduce agency, we'll reduce bank.
Absolutely. The other areas we really need to focus on is kind of ED and plain. They're the other real kind of hotspots. And they've got the workforce plans, and I don't know whether, Catherine, you want to come in on the nursing plans, but we've got the workforce plans in there, which we then need to control the workforce. The workforce hubs are really important in this as well. They do give us a level of control that is really impressive, actually. So I think in some areas where you reach that critical mass, then you do start to see it come down. But we have got hotspots where we are not seeing that come down.
Mahbub?
Yeah, thank you. We've kind of had a plan where one in and one out would be the vision, the mantra, whatever measures the workforce hub and HR colleagues make happen, and they would work with those who are recruiting to ensure that happens. So I think what you're saying is in some parts of the organisation it works well, and in other bits it doesn't. So we probably need to do a deep dive into knowing where it works well and where it doesn't, and bring some information to order. With the note I've got, and Alan said, the 76 WTEs were largely related to qualified nursing staff and reducing agency, but the big focus now is on bank as well and productivity. We could figure out whatever chief finance officers are going to receive a pack or have already got a pack about what the metrics are going to be nationally on measuring productivity. The staffing sort of discussion is fundamental to that, and perhaps the board could have a discussion around that at some time in a seminar session, and we could focus on that for 24, 25. So second question, how confident are you that we're going to get to where we need to be on this additional now that we haven't find in 2 months, which we were struggling to find 3 months anyway?
Yes, on that final point, it's not going to be easy, that's for sure. We're looking for some non-recurrent items. Yeah. We've identified some non-recurrent benefits that will help mitigate, but we essentially need to tackle the run rate. The numbers for staffing in February are broadly flat with where they were in January, so I expect the pay bill again will be above where we need it for the trajectory we need to be on. So we are looking to non-recurrent items to land where we need to land. And then when we talk in private board, we'll talk about the impact of that on the plan and the starting point for the plan. Because clearly not exiting where we need to be will make next year more challenging.
Leslie and then Janine. Just following on from Mahbub's point on productivity, I do think it would be interesting to have a discussion on productivity, because whatever happens in terms of the general election, the big focus is going to be on productivity improvement rather than money, isn't it? And particularly as given money they were going to put us in for some other purpose. So I think having that discussion on productivity and what we think we mean by it and what sort of things we might be able to do, and having kind of shared understanding would be really helpful. The other point I was going to make was on the non-clinical supplies, which relatively speaking, is showing quite a high overspend. And you say in the commentary that a lot of that is because of increased spend on security, because of treating and supporting mental health patients, particularly those needing 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 security provision. And it's, that's becoming a vicious circle. So it isn't only that we have people staying for a long time, but if it's causing us, is it something like I can't remember, 1.6 overspend million?
Roughly £200,000 a month, but we
Yeah.
get £100,000 a month.
So in terms of where we're trying to get to, that's not an insignificant figure, which we're virtuously going the wrong way as opposed to the right way at the moment. And I suppose at some point it's about making clear that it isn't only the patient cost and the cost to our staff in terms of managing things like that, but there's an actual real cost which is stopping us hitting some of our financial targets because we're overspending every month.
Yeah, I just wanted to loop back around and hopefully give some assurance regarding the workforce grip and control question, around that discipline of one in, one out, that aspiration. So there's been lots of analysis, and I'd be very happy for us, I think, to bring it to a seminar or similar to talk about that breakdown into what's driving that higher than expected number. And, so one of the key things is that we've had a much longer period of double running for some of our internationally recruited nurses in terms of them being supernumerary because of the changes to the OSCEs. And again, we've got plans in place there. And we're also working very closely with MAMTA and the clinical groups regarding that grip around the clinical workforce as well. And we believe that job planning will be instrumental in that. And the third project that I wanted to mention was just around the on-call harmonisation. So Mahbub and I did a visit to pathology, where historically we were still using on-call arrangements in order to deliver the 24/7 service. In other organisations, they'd already transitioned to having that properly rostered in, so it's not an on-call but part of someone's substantive job. So those are some of the big shifts that we're going to be making, which I think will help to drive that.
Matthew, then Ruth.
I think some productivity stuff that I think is worth bearing in mind. We're delivering better A&E performance. What we are doing at times is having 2 extra patients on multiple wards at Queen's. We're also caring for patients in corridors. So we have delivered better flow in the A&E. Some of that, though, has come through less productive ways of providing care for people elsewhere in the hospital. And if you have, some of us have been on ward visits today. If you imagine one of those 4-bedded beds with an additional patient there, that requires extra nursing. It slows down processing in the wards because the rest of the staff have more patients to get through, etc. So some of the things we've done have improved productivity in parts of the pathway and have reduced productivity elsewhere, and there's a cost associated with them. So there are internal productivity measures we need to be very sighted on. And the other element is how we work with external partners around this as well. So if we think about in January, 711 extra ambulances coming to the hospital, and it's not a trivial number, it's up from sort of 1,600 to 2,300. That is a big shift in behaviour in terms of people being brought to hospital in the BHR patch. And that we also have to do some work with the community around how we improve productivity. I mean, some of us visited one of the stroke wards this morning and had a good conversation about the relative costs of anticoagulation versus the £50,000 a year cost of someone who's had a stroke and has a disability with that for the rest of their life. And some of this is about us spending money very expensively in acute hospitals in our part of London, where actually more investment in out of hospital and community pathways and in primary care could save us really significant sums of money over coming years. And that's where, when we see what's happening with our local authority budgets, etc., that is a cause for concern. We are an expensive and relatively unproductive place to care for people who have conditions that could have been better treated outside the hospital. And I think the risk is that what we're seeing around ambulance trends and attendances is a signifier of a loss of productivity or loss of access outside the hospital, driving people to our front door.
So I was going to say a bit about that, so you've taken my time. So thank you. I think the other thing about productivity is it's not even just about, it depends how you define productivity, but we also know things like putting people in substantive posts helps things like our medical education, which is so key, because if you have people that are in and out, they're just not invested. And if we want to change the culture here, substantive posts are always going to be the way forward. I think some of my worry, and this is not just in secondary care, it's in primary care, we're certainly seeing it, is there is this sometimes appetite to keep staffing and feel like you need to, but actually it doesn't really achieve the aims of what you're ending to. There's some very obvious things we have to do around ratios, which is predominantly around the nursing. But I think some of our other positions, I'm not sure I ever really get a grasp, and this is across the board in the NHS, of quite what that role does and what the outcomes of that role therefore should be, and how are we really measuring that. It's almost an impossible task, but it's just trying to get to grips with it, which is, again, good luck to you, because it's very difficult to do.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on the finance report? I think we'll give some thought to how we most appropriately have a bigger consideration of the productivity question.
So a suggestion, I think some of this stuff's best brought to life when you look at particular pathways of care from outside the hospital through the hospital. And so, I mean, stroke's a really interesting one, and people here will have various ideas about what we could do, but that might be something for us to really unpick in a seminar session at some point. So if you look at where the cost sits throughout some of these journeys, actually, there's, there's a lot of money in North East London in the NHS, but where we spend that in a minute is in the most expensive place, actually, and it's something we should be thinking differently.
Thank you. Annual goals.
Yes, thank you. So these are a set of organisational priorities that help us focus on how to tackle some of the issues that we've just been talking about, actually. So something around how do we reduce temporary staff premium? How do we increase data efficiency, and how do we deliver EPR, all included in the annual goals. So these are brought to board today for a recommendation to approve the goals, to approve the headline objectives, and to approve the high-level deliverables. And to help the board with that decision, I just want to remind us of what they're about and how we've gone about developing them. So the annual goals are part of our integrated business planning approach. So that's not only the numerical plans that we continue to iterate at the moment, and they will come back to this one. But the second part of that are the organisational goals, which help us to prioritise those numerical plans. We have 6 goals, the same 6 headlines as we've had last year. And we continue to update those goals based on current needs, based on our future ambitions, and also based on national operational guidance. So when that comes out, we'll absolutely be able to respond to that. So how we developed them this year, this has been full executive input in developing these goals. And on Linda Story's very good recommendation in terms of governance, we have taken them through QUAC, PCC, FIC, and bookended those with 2 trips through tech as well. And you will have seen that noted in the reports in the board today. That's given us a wealth of feedback about the goals, and very helpful feedback, some conflicting feedback, but what we have done with that is we've taken that back as execs and built our responses around that particular feedback, and have done a final synthesis of that. And that's helped us, I think, really focus the goals, has helped us reduce the number of goals as well, because that was part of the feedback that we had, that we started to grow this into War and Peace. What's left is a few minor changes that will happen, with a few changes of names, additions of names once posts have been recruited to, and should anything surprise us with the operational guidance when it lands, there may be some changes as a result of that. But these are the organisational goals we want to recommend to the board for approval. If approved, We will confirm the numerical plans based on these goals, and we will come back to board on a biannual basis to update in terms of progress.
Thank you. Leslie, sorry. On the goal, despite already having had one go round.
I know, but I sort of made the point earlier, I just don't like the wording of the one that says address the inequalities of staff and patients, because it sounds as though they have inequalities, they're experiencing inequity and inequality because of what is happening to them, not because they have an inequality in and of themselves. And I suppose for me, it's just wording just jars a little bit because it sounds as though it's their fault that they have an inequality.
Address the inequalities experienced by staff.
Because they haven't got them. And on the equality one, it's just having read the report, the equality delivery standard report. I'm assuming that the second one down, this dashboard, is the same as the patient outcome report, which is going to detail disparities by protected characteristics, which is due to be produced by April. I wondered if we could actually have a deliverable which is to reduce any disparity rather than to produce a report, because if we're going to produce it by April anyway, at the start of the year, the goal could actually be to reduce any disparity due to any inequality experienced by people. It's just a little bit more positive than the report. Only because I saw the report was due by April and discussed the report earlier. Sorry. Nothing?
Yeah, so I'm sure it'd be easy to comment that there's too many, but frankly, there's an awful lot to do. So I think it kind of is what it is. The bit I really like is that for most of them, there is a SMART goal. There is something that will tell us, you know, the safe achievement. The one I just wanted to mention, which is the right one, but is on the conversation we've just had around productivity. For some reason, it says NA, and I wasn't sure whether that was not available or not applicable. And I'm sure it is applicable. And I would, for example, be really keen to see something in there around. It's not just about doing more that we've got, but actually reducing the waste. And in Bruce's kind of space where, you know, is everything adding value? And I just wonder if the discussion we've talked about having, whether that's going to get filled in, because it just looks like a strange blank to me. Is that right?
Yeah, that should definitely be filled in. Yeah, we'll fill in. I'll be more productive.
Thank you. I was going to refer final feedback to executive colleagues who hold those goals. Any other questions or comments? James?
Not so much a question, just a comment. I've made it before, but I'll make it again, I guess, for completeness. So I just think that these are all fine, basically. But I think the collaboration and the approach to acute provider collaboration in London, around the country, and what we've been asked to do by NHS London is a bit more fundamental than just having it as one of 22 separate things on the 6 domains. So the way it's written is kind of fine, but I just wonder, Jackie, if there was something a bit more that sits above this around, because the collaboration is actually an enabler for a number of these goals. But you wouldn't know that unless you knew that, if that kind of makes sense. So I guess that's my only comment.
Is there something around the context within which we're operating?
It's almost like a paragraph somewhere. Might explain.
And to respond to that, absolutely, and that would form part of the annual plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the context.
Yeah.
Caroline?
I just wonder, perhaps if you're missing a trick with something here around the staff experience, because it's linked very closely there to EDI. Also, you've spoken about the manager passports and things like that. And I think EDI is one part of it, but in terms of people's day-to-day lives being well led, well managed, so perhaps that's something that could be included some way there, because I think that would also something that could be very, very measurable and that you could link in with self-serve.
Just wanted to commend Anne on her patience and all because every time this comes anywhere, we all come up with something new for you, and you have been extraordinarily supportive of our ideas and our thoughts. And actually, I think you've done a pretty damn good job of distilling down that contradictory feedback that you've had. You've made it a manageable and understandable document, and I think it's enough for us to work at, to be honest. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you for your efforts, and thanks to everybody for all the input at various different stages along the way. And this is the last stage of governance, yes. Okay, good. Thank you. Board assurance framework. Linda.
Thank you. So the report represents the forecast as we go towards the end of Q4. So it looks back across the year at the BAF risks across the year. So 2 risks have improved in risk level across the year. So patient experience and workforce showing less risk. And that's reflected in the scoring, and the narrative gives a number of reasons for that. In Q3, the planned care risk had already reduced, and we reported that to previous board. Maternity services had improved right at the beginning of the financial year. And the digital risk, Nick is reflecting that as we move to implementation phase, potentially more risk in particular one. So it's a summary of where we've got to, with the narrative giving the key points as to why colleagues believe that we are at that point as we go forward. And referencing the previous item on the agenda, we'll now map the goals to the new BAF as we move forward into the next financial year.
The mining one was about the delivery high quality patient maternity services ED safety, and we remain on 20 in Q4. And yet we've seen a significant improvement in ED, which I'm wondering why that's not moving. Is it that our schools before were underrated? Should they have been even higher? Because it just doesn't feel right that we're seeing a clear improvement. We're seeing, yes, flow into the hospital is still a problem, but we've also got SDEC that is certainly improving a level, or at least a route of flow that is so much better, but it doesn't feel like it's represented in the BAF.
I mean, I'd look to Catherine, but I think we'd all agree we're still really concerned about the way that A&E flow works. And I think there's still a significant number of patients spending 12+ hours waiting, and we still have real corridor care issues here at Queen's as well. So I think we've made significant improvement. But you know, if you look at today, Queen's is absolutely at the gills at the minute. Actually, I think if you went and walked through the department now, you'd probably feel that we've got the risk assessment in about the right place. I'm not sure it was that we didn't have it right before. I think that still adequately reflects the degree of risk we're carrying with that until we get the 12-hour waits.
I would say while the patients, Linda and I talked quite a lot about this around whether we should be sitting at 20 at the current time. So I think in terms of the performance, are we seeing more patients within 4 hours? Absolutely. But we are constrained by the physical space within ED, and therefore the way patients are spread around. I yet think there's a lot more we could do, and why we've kept quality and safety at 20. And I think we're working through the nursing, the medical. So there's a lot that needs to be done for us to be assured that it needs to be downgraded. Linda had the same question for me.
Good. Well, that's a useful question that arises out of the board assurance framework. Thank you. Is there any other business? Okay, let's do questions from the public. Andy, I'm acknowledging receipt of your request for information under the environmental information regulations. Okay.
May I speak briefly?
No, because this isn't, you can ask a question,
Right, there was earlier correspondence where it said you wouldn't take verbal requests for environmental regulations at this point, but I defer to your judgment.
No, so that's why I'm saying, you emailed us. I'm publicly, so you can say I'm publicly acknowledging receipt of them, and we will respond to your request. Although I think we have responded on several occasions previously, but obviously we'll look in detail at what you have emailed us today, and we'll respond to you on that.
Okay, hopefully I sent you another request in about wards, virtual wards.
You did, you sent in a question, yeah, do you want to ask that?
Well, it's just, as per usual, academics say different things about subjects. This particular report was concerned that virtual walls can lead to more problems and they're more expensive in the long term. It's just whether you have anyone around the table has any views on that subject.
Matthew will respond.
Hi, Andy. So, yeah, thank you for the question. And it is, I saw that same report and we were asking that same question of ourselves. What I'll do is I'll talk through, we've had a look at 3 models. We've looked at our virtual ward, which we're running at 30 beds at the minute. We've also looked at Queen's Frailty Unit, which is our frailty assessment unit, 30 beds as well. And Clementine B, which is an inpatient frailty care in the elderly ward here at Queen's as well, with 31 beds, so fairly similar base costs. The direct cost of the 30 virtual ward beds, and we'll send you the details, so I'll round up some of these numbers. The virtual ward is around £2 million for 30 beds. Queen's Frailty Unit, it's a frailty assessment unit, so it's expensive because it's high staff, round the clock care. That's about £5.6 million. Clementine B around £3.5 million. So the basic per bed cost works out well for the virtual wards at around £183 a day for virtual ward, £515 a day for the frailty assessment unit, and £312 a day for the frailty ward. But it is worth saying that the length of stay varies. So the length of stay you'd see in the virtual ward is around 4.4 days, 4.5 days, patients there. Frailty assessment unit shorter at 2 days. You'd expect that because people are moving through more quickly. Clementine B is an inpatient ward. The average length of stay is around 10 days. So the average cost per stay is around £800 for the virtual ward, around £1,000 for a frailty assessment unit, and around £3,000 for the inpatient unit. So what you see is quite different cost bases that we can send to you. What we're finding though is our view is that the virtual ward is offering good value for money, and where you compare it to an inpatient ward, it's certainly good value for money, but it is a different threshold of care and a different level of illness. So we think it's delivering good value for us. We can send you that breakdown, the charts, and we'll publish it in a minute so people can have a good look at it. We've certainly not found findings consistent with what was reported by those academics.
And thank you for the detailed report, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to the end of the open board meeting. We'll reconvene at 3:15. Thank you. Sorry.
That's